Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
All right, welcome to the About podcast, as the nice lady said. My name is Jeremy Scott. I am one of your hosts here, along with Roy Hookey. Roy, how you doing this morning?
I am superb. I think I'm a little bit more lively today than you are, my friend.
I know. This might be a little bit of a reversal from the last couple of sessions. I don't know. It's Friday. It's still the Friday. We're recording this the Friday after Easter. To be fair.
Listen, man, how long do you need to recover? Come on.
About a week.
Do you?
Yeah, it's about a week. It really is. I'm actually feeling better now. I was a zombie on Monday. Oh, my gosh. So,
for those that don't know, we should probably tell them that you're a pastor. And
yes.
Holy Week is a big deal for you.
Yes. Well, a big deal for a lot of people. But yes, it is basically our Super Bowl. Like, we talk about it. Like, Easter's fine. Or Christmas is fine. Easter's the big show because you got all that stuff. And then, the 2,000 people we had here on Saturday for the Easter egg hunt,
2,000?
2,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, I'm getting there. By Sunday, I should be all right. That's my goal.
That's good.
So
you got a job to do on Sunday.
I do. Yeah, that doesn't stop. But so I'm glad we record these on Fridays and not Mondays. This would not have gone well on Monday.
Yeah.
But today we want to talk about financial planning, the idea of it, and I'm not sure why we didn't start with that, but when we started doing this, but that's okay. And we were talking a little before we hit record here, and made me think about when I first came to talk to you about kind of financial planning, and really what I was thinking about was retirement. And in that case, my wife had just switched jobs, and we had, like 4 different previous retirement accounts that, a little bit here and a little bit there and all that. They were like, we should consolidate this down into one thing, and that kind of stuff. And so I imagine that's a pretty popular impetus for people to start thinking about it is, you got this little 401k from over here, maybe a little pension over there, what are we going to do with all of this? And so that's really all I was thinking about when we first sat down with you, and then just talking, realizing, this is about a lot more than just that. Because, you asked us about our income and our debts and, all this other stuff, which was fine. It's not something I'm used to having people ask me about because most people don't. It's not a polite conversation. But it definitely discovered relatively quickly that it was financial planning as an idea was far more expensive than just, do you have enough money for retirement or even know how much money you need? Yeah,
it's definitely when people come in, they don't know what to expect a lot of times.
Yeah.
Definitely not prepared. To go through that conversation. So I know that going into it. So I kind of created a process where I kind of walk them through it. But a lot of people liken it to financially getting naked in front of somebody. And
that's fair.
It's a very very uncomfortable thing if you've never done it before.
Right.
But understanding that why are you working with someone like me, a financial planner, is because you want to be able to have a third party, unemotional, that can actually guide you and care about your situation. Right. And that's once people think sit down with me and actually understand, like, okay, this is actually going to be pretty cool because I have somebody now to talk to when I have these big decisions to make that I don't know how to make them.
Right.
Because you come across it a few times in your lifetime. I'm talking about it every day.
Right. Yeah. And you can tell that too. And it is a little vulnerable experience. I mean, like you said, it's very vulnerable. It's not and I think it's just something we're not used to talking about, with other people. We think about it as pretty private, and because, money's important. Our financial health is important to us. But I remember afterwards, Dane was like, it kind of felt similar to like when people come in to talk to her about their health. A lot of times they don't want to do it. Or really, I think the more concern is you feel like you're going to be judged.
Yes,
right?
100%.
Like, because none of us probably feel all that adequate. Like nobody's like, I got plenty of money. I mean, maybe some people do. I don't know. But they're like, no, I'm fine. I got plenty of money. I got all the money I need. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I've ever felt that way.
Yeah, well, and even if people have a lot of money, there's different problems that come with that, and everybody feels insecure about it because a lot of times where you're at in life is the first time you've been there, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to have the ability to, navigate through those waters with somebody who's done it before, the financial planning aspect of it for me is very educational. Me being a former teacher, that is a big, big component of what I do and a lot of planners do, because if you have education around the concepts, the ideas, the situation you're in, you're now armed to make a good decision. And it's not for me to tell you what to do. It's for me to help educate you around kind of here are some options that make sense and what makes sense for you personally at the end of that conversation. A lot of people actually, even by just talking to me, they'll talk themselves into what the right answer is.
I believe that. Yeah, because sometimes you start talking about stuff, you just got to say it out loud.
Yep.
And as you say things out loud, you're like, oh, wait. Yep. Well, and I remember you asking us about things like our goals and what we wanted to be, and ultimately, what's the next thing, and all that sort of stuff. And I realized that, she and I had those conversations, kind of in broad strokes, but actually sitting down again, saying them out loud to somebody else, that hadn't been anything that really had happened. And then to really kind of have that moment to reflect, I'm like, okay, like if those are actually our goals, what's it going to take to get there? Yeah. Probably, it's not impossible, but it's going to take some work and some planning and some saving. And
two big questions, right? Where are you going and how do you get there?
Yeah.
Just putting those two questions on the table is very thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting talking to young couples specifically about what their goals are.
Right.
And they're like, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. So that's a little bit more of a process of education and kind of walking them through like, okay, let's just start at square one for those folks and understand what your budget is.
Right.
But the question gets asked to me a lot of times around the concept of like, I don't actually know what you do.
Right.
Can you paint me a picture?
Right. So if you had to give, like, what do they call it? Like the elevator speech, like the famous idea of the elevator speech, you've got 60 seconds to convince somebody from ground zero to the 10 floor 10, what you do, like what?
That's a really good one. I've thought about this many times. Actually, I've never come up with a good one. And
okay.
I actually think realistically, just from off the cuff, educating people to empower them to make the best financial decisions for themselves is what I do.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That's really what I do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's a catalyst for people coming to talk to me in the first place. And it usually has to be with some life event has happened. And, young people are like, well, I need to start being an adult now. Or, people who are older in life change jobs and they have that old plan like you talked about in your guys' situation. Or, hey, I'm actually getting really close to retirement now. And boy, I need to be able to start making a plan for like, how am I going to make this happen? Or I'm in retirement and, now I need to start thinking about like, how do I make sure that things pass on to my spouse or my heirs the way that I want them to. So every phase of life has a different component that's going to be new to everybody along the way.
Right.
And that's why financial planning is such a big deal, because how do I get equipped with the best information, knowledge, know-how to make a decision that's best for me?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
That is.
And it's an emotional one too.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest component that I help people do is separate their emotion from their money.
Oh, but I'm very emotional about my money.
You are. So is everybody.
Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah.
So guess what? I run my own financial decisions by what? Another friend of mine who's a financial planner.
There you go. Right? There you go.
So it's just, that's human nature. Mm-hmm. And for me to be able to separate from the emotion is a really big part of that financial planning concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I actually had somebody stop me the other day. We're just out and about, and they were just like, I've been meaning to talk to you. I'm kind of interviewing people right now, and I just want to understand, like, how do you do things? They're working with someone now. They're like, I'm not really fulfilled with what they're doing for me.
Okay.
And that's why, I think helping people have an understanding of what we do is a really good theme for this podcast. So for instance, like when you came in, like what was your actual experience is what I would like to kind of paint a picture of for people so they understand, like, what does this mean when I'm going in and talking with this fella?
Oh, not much. I mean, I through the church, you get a little bit of, education around, the pension and, those sorts of things and the options available there. And if you want, you can, attend seminars and they'll sit down and talk with you a little bit about it. But I mean, a little bit of financial education, mostly, geared towards things like retirement, and within the system, like within the pensions and the stuff, then the different things that are offered through the church. That was about it. I had worked with one other place before because I'd rolled a, $20,000 former, 401k into something when I left a job. But, it was just one of those things. They're like, yeah, we'll shove it in this fund over here for you and we'll see you later. And that was about it. And I never heard from them again. And, until I was ready to move it somewhere else. So that was really about it as far as like financial planning went. And we had done, just the two of us, like some in our heads, just like, okay, if we want to get here, we want to get there. Let's not make sure we're making dumb decisions here. But, that was about it, but nothing formal.
So then when you actually came in and sit down with me, can you, I know it's like thinking back, but can you remember, like, what were you thinking when you actually came in to sit down with me and the expectation that you kind of had in your head versus the reality of what actually occurred?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. I think the thing that the expectation was we have all these little pots of money. We should put them together somewhere and get some idea of what, over time that's going to look like. And so we can kind of plug it into our, retirement thinking. And that was about it. I mean, it was just, we need to find a way to manage this because it's unmanageable having, this fund spread into 4 different places that we can't barely keep track of. I was actually kind of really concerned we were going to lose track of something, and 20 years down the line, it'd be like, hey, by the way, you've got this money. It's been just sitting here doing nothing interesting for, 20 years. You're like, oh man.
Well,
so,
and that's
and just to
actually,
kind of simplify everything.
That's actually a good point to stop you a little bit, because that is the perception of most people have, is that it's investments.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's a really good premise of, I'm going to talk about investments.
Right.
Which does occur. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, did you have any other part of that before you came in that you were going to continue there? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Not really, because I think I'm in the case where a lot of people are, where when I think about investments, I mean, if I have investments, or at the time, especially the only investments I had were in retirement. I mean, that was my understanding and, scope of investing. Didn't feel like I had. It was in a place, well, in like a, in a 529 for my kids' college, and kind of those kind of standard products. But, that was about it. But I don't think I had things like, our anything that we had on, financed or, anything like that. I wasn't probably thinking about anything like that when I came in.
So that's kind of the norm.
Yeah.
People are like, okay, I have some investment money and I want to make sure that I have enough for retirement. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the premise. That's a very good premise that most people have.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you actually set up an appointment with me. You come in. Can you kind of recall what your experience was? I actually remembered you vividly saying that, wow, that was really good.
Yeah.
I remember that, but I'm curious what went through your mind and how that experience kind of progressed for you.
Well, as you kind of walked us through, in the questions you asked, I mean, obviously we talked about the retirement accounts, but we also talked about things like income and where we were and where, debt and normal savings and all of that. And then I do remember the conversation about, what are we looking towards, like, as far as, purchases or lifestyle changes or, whatever. And I know we had a conversation about the fact that, like, right now, at the time and right now, I live in a parsonage, which is great. But it means that I live in a house I don't own. So I'm not gaining equity in that house. So I need to, which is how most Americans build wealth, is, equity in their homes and all that. Well, that's not, we weren't in a place in life we were doing that. So, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, well, what does that mean? Right. I mean, it's a great thing now, but what's going to offset the fact that we're not doing that right now, and eventually we're probably going to want to, right? And so whenever we're into whatever the next appointment, job, whatever is, we need to be in a position to make sure we can actually do that. And I think I knew in the back of my head I needed to do that, but we weren't at that point where we were actually being all that serious about saying, well, wait a minute, how long until we need to do that? And then what do we need to have saved? How much down payment do we want? And, where do we think we're going to go? And so it got ball rolling on a lot of different conversations, both with you and then between her and I afterwards. And it was just more holistic. It was a much more holistic look at, just our overall financial situation than I was expecting to have. I'm not sure why, but I just was expecting to talk about retirement.
Yeah, you've never done it. Did you feel judged?
No, but there were some awkward moments. You're just like, and I'm like trying to think through, well, how much do we, especially the debt conversation, because that's a bit of a thing with me, and I'm not sure how other people feel about it, but I have this kind of weird thing about debt. I mean, I think there's times it's useful and it's fine. But those conversations are always a little bit, can be a little bit fraught, just personally. And I'm sure different people have different aspects that they're, concerned about. But it felt like it had the potential, like I had the potential to feel that way, but I didn't. Right? You're just like, this feels a little uncomfortable, this feels vulnerable, but it actually ended up being fine.
Yeah, and it's a piece of information that's really needed to help us figure out
going,
right? Like, so, well, that's important because that's one thing where you never want someone to come in and feel bad about the experience they had. Now, it can be awkward, for sure, and that's not unintentional. And what I mean by that is those are important questions that have to be answered. And the best part is when you have two people sitting next to each other and they look at each other when I ask a question. They're like, what are you going to say? Oh, what are you going to say? You go first.
I believe it.
And that's always
it's like, how honest are we going to be at this current moment?
Yeah, that's always kind of fun. But, so I liken it to, think about how much effort you put into your career as a pastor, improving personal development, right? Planning that you do for the career. You do a planning for the entire church staff.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, lots of planning.
Okay, so why wouldn't we do that in our own lives on our own finances?
Right.
That's the whole concept. And that's why I think it's so powerful that financial planning is really taking root as it's not investment management, which is a part of it.
Right.
But it's actually like, what the heck are we doing? Why are we doing it? And where's it going to get us to go? And what do I need to do to improve? And that's the big question that everyone can ask themselves. Like, okay, I could probably do something to make this a little bit better, just like we do in our own careers,
right?
Our own relationships, our marriages, etc.
Yeah. And I think what it really helped us do, because I was feeling very, rooted and still feel very rooted in what I was doing. But, my wife at the time was thinking about, a transition away from clinical practice into teaching and, and wanted to do that. And I think it was... and when you're contemplating, anytime we've made big changes in my life or whatever, it's usually the financial piece is where the rubber really meets the road. Like, there's plenty of things I would like to do. Like the limiting factor, whether it's a job change, a move, or even, hobbies, whatever, is usually what can you afford?
Yeah.
Right. And so doing that kind of planning, we're going, okay, like, can we do that tomorrow? No. Can we put ourselves in a position where we can do it in a year? Maybe.
And how does it fit into the hierarchy of what's really important to you?
Yes.
Because maybe it actually is something you can afford. But should you, if you have other things that are more important on the hierarchy financially?
Right.
Right? Are you, not funding some retirement account or, your emergency fund, or maybe having to look at life insurance or putting an estate plan in place that costs money?
Right.
Those aren't fun.
No.
Nobody wants to do that. They'd rather do the fun thing, right?
Right.
But what's most important to you? And if you're in a relationship, it's not just you.
Right.
Now you have to, negotiate.
Yeah. Well, and I think the planning piece that's what it is planning, right? And going, okay, like, I can do this now, but, does that going to delay this bigger thing that I want to do? Like, I want to go back to school or I want to do that stuff. Like, well, okay, I can't do that until, these debts are paid off because it just, the numbers don't work. Like, okay. So having a plan for me makes it easier for me to be disciplined, like in the day to day, and go, okay, yes, I could, buy the new car, or I could XYZ. But really that just means I'm putting off how much I'm moving down the path to the thing I actually want to get to. And I think it's more important now. I think in the days, especially of 0% interest and all that kind of stuff, it was really tempting for people to do things, more, a little more, maybe more impulsively. But, now that, we live in a different world where,
Money costs you money.
yeah, where, we've moved to this place where actually savings is far more rewarded, than it had been for the last few years. I mean, spending was very rewarded for the last few years, and now we're in a different world where savings is more rewarded. So, I think it's also probably a good time for people to, even if they had a plan, to even think about, okay, like, the world's different now, financial realities are different now. It's a time to reassess the plan. Because that's the conversation I better remember, is the first couple conversations where you got us all set up. But that was one thing. It was the one about a year later, when my wife thought she was transitioning to a new job. So she left one job, but was taking a little time off, and then was planning to start a new one. And the new one ended up not working out at the last minute. And we sat down with you, and we're like, oh my gosh, like, what do we do? We expect her to be on, we had planned, and we're, well situated for her to be unemployed for a couple months. It looked like it was going to be longer than that. And you kept bringing the conversation back to being like, well, what do you want to do? Right? Like, where do you want to get? Because she was looking at all kinds of stuff, a lot of things that I don't think she would have enjoyed doing, and she didn't think she would enjoy doing. But, you're just like, well, hold on.
Well, I remember her specifically bringing up a job. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I remember bringing up this job, and I was just thinking to myself, like, you are so they will not value you
right
the way that your education, positioned you to do.
Yeah.
But I remember talking through that specifically, and I think maybe a little bit of a light bulb came on there, being like, oh yeah, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, because once you've done that, it becomes hard to. I think the conversation we had afterwards is like, well, the problem is, like, if we take something now, if you just take something now, that's gonna be the thing you do, and it's gonna be really hard to keep looking for the thing you actually want to do. And it was only a couple months later that she, found the job that really was the job she should have been doing. I mean, it just took a little more time than, but the fact that, you weren't freaking out. I mean, I'm not supposed you ever really do. But you're like, no, actually you're okay. Like, you're going to need to maybe tighten the belt for a little bit, but the world's not going to end if you take the time to
find
the thing. It's like, I don't know if you quite talked about it this way, but how I came to talk about it was like, that time was an investment, right? It was, you were like, okay, we're gonna invest this time in finding the better thing and ultimately get it into a better place, long term.
Yep.
So
yeah, Tony, I want to kind of circle back to your first couple meetings, right? Because you mentioned how we couldn't really have a deeper conversation until I actually fully understood everything.
Yes.
And it usually takes a few appointments to do that.
Yeah. I remember a couple times.
Yep.
Yeah.
To dig through everything. And that's really the first step of financial planning, is actually just it's like, hey, here's my financial life. It's now on a map in front of us, and we know where everything is.
Right.
And until you have that, you don't really have enough information to make the best decisions, especially from a third party looking at, in an unemotional way. So that's really the first part of financial planning, is actually just putting that map together and figuring out where every penny's at, right? And then talking about those goals, and then getting into, we had some retirement goals.
Yeah.
And then life hits you, like it does everybody.
Yes.
And then we have to start making decisions based off of now what's really important to us right now, right? Really down nuts and bolts, and in the moment, because then you can have the long term, but you also have the short term.
Right.
And that's meeting people where they need to be is part of the financial planning process. It's not me telling you, I'm not Dave Ramsey, which is a good example,
right? Because
he has kind of a system, which is very good to get you financially in a good position.
Right.
Mine is to help you navigate the waters of life.
Right.
And just kind of explore, like, what are our options in this situation? What can we do here? How do I save for college for my kids? Should I save in a 529, which you brought up earlier? But there's also other options called custodial accounts, or I could just save it in my own savings account. What makes sense and why? And how is it taxed differently? And
right.
All of those things are just different nuances that being educated around now, that we know what's important to you, we can actually now feel like, oh, well, this is the right decision because of all the information that we now understand.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of us are just kind of, we do the default. I mean, like the 529. I mean, like, we heard of that. We knew it was a product that existed. I think we actually went down to the bank, and set it up. And it was a conversation, though. It was the conversation was not about, when we did that, the conversation was not about saving for college. The conversation was about setting up a 529. And then there was no conversation about our retirement plan, anything else.
How much are you saving?
You know,
what's the end point here?
Right. So I think sitting down with you the first time, I had kind of like that, a holistic conversation about financial life, our financial life with anybody outside of my marriage. I mean, it's outside the two of us. Like that was the first time we ever sat down with anybody, looked at it as a whole. It was a little bit more compartmentalized than that. I'm like, I'll talk to, Westpath, who's the provider for our health, for my retirement, about my retirement. And she'll talk to her HR department about her retirement. And then, we'll try to say, well, this looks like enough. Maybe.
Yeah. And then being able to actually sit down with someone like me, put it together and make it make sense. Because even if I'm not managing the money, that's not the end goal here to set your plan up. Right. We just need to know where it's at. And then a lot of times I'll ask people like, well, what kind of risk do you have on that money? Mm-hmm. No idea. Right. So just education around that concept. That's another podcast in itself, by the way.
Yeah.
Risk,
good one. Yeah, risk, good
diversification, all those good things.
Yeah.
Those are all important and need to be part of the overall plan.
Right.
But we got to first start with where is it at?
Yeah.
Why is it doing what it's doing? How much are you saving? Why are you saving that much? What's the tax implications?
Right.
And all of that plays into that concept. But getting people to actually let's row our boat in the same direction.
Yes.
So that we're in sync and things are working, and people have such relief when they know that they're doing the right stuff.
Oh, I totally believe it. Well, I think the other final thing that I came away from that first conversation with was even just having that conversation about things like my church pension money, which is there's some of that I can direct, and I don't know how I decided. Somewhere along the way, I filled out some online form, and they said, "Okay, invest in these." And I know you looked at that and you said, "Well," and let the options and help me tweak it. And that's not money you're managing, or can. I mean, it's kind of is where it is. But I think the idea of financial planning. I mean, yes, you're managing some money for me, and you manage money for your clients. But that part of your role is look at things beyond that and advise beyond even, the investing or products that you yourself are providing, and that's part of it too, because it wasn't probably where it needed to be for where I was at my age. And after we had a conversation about risk, which yes is another podcast, but those funds, which are not insignificant, weren't reflective of where I probably needed them to be. And I don't know that I would have ever really thought about it had you not asked to see it and reviewed it and said, okay, this is why I think maybe you want to make some changes here.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I liked your comment about forgetting something earlier, because that's happened to people. And the government tries to put things in place to protect people from themselves. Yeah. So if you're saving in a 401k now today, there's these things called, I won't even get into what it's called, but there's a default option based off your age that you go into.
Yeah.
When you go into a 401k or a retirement account through a company.
Yeah.
And that didn't used to exist. So I actually heard a story one time about a lady that had money going into her 401k her whole career and was never invested. It just sat in cash.
Wow.
So the compounding effect that she could have had was zero.
Right.
And she thought the whole time that it was being invested, right? And this is older period of time when technology wasn't so easy. You could just log in and look at everything, right?
Right.
But part of it was on her for not paying attention.
Right.
But part of it was also on just the educational aspect around it from the company and just knowing that. But paying attention to your own, nobody's going to take care of your finances but you.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to be responsible with that. It's very similar to nobody's going to take care of their own faith except for themselves. Right. It's not.
Right.
It's not your job as a pastor to take care of someone's faith. It's to help educate and guide. Right. That's why our careers are so parallel in regards to how we approach things, because it's very similar.
Right.
Right. And it's a fun and fulfilling thing for me to do that and help people be able to feel prepared for life.
Yeah.
And you're just doing the same thing in the spiritual realm, right?
Yeah. Well, try. Oh, okay. So it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that story, because actually I had something very similar. This maybe actually isn't necessarily even a good example. When I went to seminary, the last thing after I left my job, the last thing I did was cash out the 401k there and roll it into that same IRA I had set up with that company all those years ago. And I filled out the paperwork and it rolled it in there great. Completely forgot about it for like 3 years. And then they called me 3 years later and said, do you know you have this money that's been sitting in cash for 3 years? And I'm like, no, it didn't get invested the way all the other stuff was invested. And they're like, no. And like, because you didn't check a box, or whatever. But it wasn't a lot of money. Relatively speaking, which is, why they're like, yeah, it's been sitting there. However, because it was sitting there, I missed the 2008 crash, because it was 2009 that they called me. It's like, you should probably invest this money now.
Dumb luck.
Yeah, it's like, you are the luckiest person I've ever seen. I'm like, well, too bad it was like 20 grand. It wasn't like, it was something, but it wasn't like, I'm like, oh, well. But he's like, but that's what it took for them to notice. God knows how long it would have just sat there, in cash. But it sat for 3 years in cash doing nothing. And so, I also missed out on a lot of, good stuff, too. So but I wasn't paying attention. They didn't ask. I didn't ask. Nobody wasn't working with somebody who was asking me questions about it.
That's a perfect segue into the next portion of the financial planning journey, is that I require clients to meet with me at least once a year.
Yeah.
It can be virtual if we needed it to be, because, I do have clients all over the United States, but we have to get together once a year just to go through where is everything at.
Right.
And let's look at everything and make sure we understand it. And if I don't understand, if it's an investment and I don't know how it's invested, I'm always asking for a statement.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I want to see how is it invested, to confirm, right, that it's pointing in the same direction as everything else.
Yeah.
And that just health, just like going to the doctor, you need a health checkup.
Right.
Yeah. You need a financial checkup once a year.
Yeah.
You need a health checkup once a year, just to make sure we're staying on the course that we originally set. And also, did anything else happen in the last year that I'm personally not aware of as the third party here in the situation that maybe didn't get all the memos, right?
Right.
and does that adjust our plan at all? And the best part, honestly, I actually had a client in the other day. It was really funny. They were like, wow, you're one of the first people that ever told us we needed to take a vacation. Because they were working so hard and they talked about their goals and what's important to them, and they were so on track with everything. I'm like, you guys really need to reward yourselves for how hard you're working and go on a vacation.
Right.
And they did, and they shared with me that, when they took the kids, and the kids they're teaching their kids well, and their kids are understanding the fiscal responsibility, and like they don't want to spend too much money on frivolous things and yada yada. And they went on this trip and the kids wanted something, right? And the mom and dad were like, no, trip is paid for. You guys can do what you want. If you want that, we'll get it for you. It's paid for. We saved to make sure that we could do this and have fun and just enjoy it together. Right. They actually, how many people go on vacation, put on a credit card and just like, oh, I'll worry about it later. And there's still this like little bit of fraught tension in the background that is going to come due later, and to have it up front paid for, and just the fulfillingness of showing your kids that we did this and we were responsible and we can enjoy this to the full extent and not have any regret or guilt for doing it.
Right.
That's empowering.
No, yeah, absolutely. I'm getting ready to take my daughter to the UK at the end of May. It's her 13-year-old trip. We did the same thing for my son. But we knew this was coming. We knew it was coming, years in advance. So we saved, and so now when it came time to buy plane tickets, the money was there. When it came time to buy, whatever, and, all that kind of stuff. So I'm very excited to go and take her and have that experience with her. It would be a little curtailed if I was watching like a credit card bill, or credit card balance increase as I was doing it. And, I will have to be, somewhat reasonable. I'm not bringing home any diamond chandeliers or anything. But we'll be fine. It'll be fine. And it won't be anything I have to worry about while I'm there.
Yeah.
But because I plan, but we've been planning this for 5 years.
Yep. The range of where you need to be. Yeah. And that goes back to the live today, but plan for tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can't just plan everything for tomorrow. You have to have some fun along the way.
Yeah.
Doing this podcast is one of those things for me it's been a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. I'll actually come out, after we're done, I'm kind of giddy about things just because it's fun. It's it's different. It's fun. It's educational. You're hoping and you're reaching other people that can learn a nugget of information that could help them on their journey of life, financially or otherwise. And that is, having that fun along the way is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, that's interesting. Huh, you didn't tell me to take a vacation.
Well,
I only work 1 day a week, so it doesn't really matter.
That's right.
How much vacation you need. But the annual checkups are great, and I have really appreciated that. My personal experience with that has been really positive, and it's just to be able to check in and go, okay, because it's out of sight, out of mind, a lot of it, and it's just sometimes it's just nice, like, okay, actually if things are fine in our last checkup, things were fine. And so you're like, okay, like I don't, it's not something I'm not thinking about it, but I also probably don't, I just need to, as long as, I continue on the course that I'm on. I'm on we're on a good course now. So now I'm just like, okay, so that's one less thing to stress about. Like if something shifts, absolutely, then, I need to take that on account. But it's nice to know, like, all right, I'm on path for the plan that I have. And you're like, great. Like that's a little peace of mind to go, okay, I'm not, now I can, if I worry about it later, I'm like, nope, that's right. Roy said, this, and this, like, that's right. We're okay.
Yeah.
Peace of mind, man. Peace of mind.
The peace of mind is everything. And it's interesting because I think going to a financial planner is potentially, let's say it's like a dentist or a doctor. Do you particularly look forward to it? People who in the beginning of a relationship with me, I would say probably not, because they don't know what they're going to experience.
Yeah.
And then when you start getting, my mom's favorite statement, your ducks in a row, right? And things are getting organized and you know what's happening and why it's happening.
Yeah.
What I've found is people view it as less of going to the dentist, which is just always you're wrought with anticipation, but it's more like going, and kind of having a nice conversation with a friend, if you will, somebody who's a champion for you in life, and you look forward to it versus being like, ugh, I have to go talk to Roy. Now, the people who don't like to talk to me are people who they know they're in a bad financial position.
Right.
They're potentially not making the decisions they need to be making to alter course.
Yeah.
And they don't want to come talk to me because they know.
Right.
They know before I even look at anything. They know.
Yeah.
So it's a much different experience, though, when you feel good about what you're doing, why you're doing it, understand what you're doing, make good decisions, and coming in and staying on track is very easy to do.
Yeah.
Getting on track is where the most difficulty comes for people, because sometimes you have to make lifestyle changes to do that.
Right.
Which, again, not my job to tell you what you do or what decisions to make. It's just to educate you around the ramifications of those decisions.
Right. Well, and I think that's important. I think, it's that other side of it that's maybe, important, as important, if not maybe even more important, is the accountability piece to it. There is a little bit of accountability when you have to sit down and look and go, okay, like this is what's going on, and deal with the numbers. Then there's an accountability piece comes with it, but it's also like a self-accountability, right? Like you're not setting other people's goals, right? You may be reminding them what they said their goals were, but there's a self-accountability to it to go, am I doing what I can to get to where I say it is or I think it is that I want to go. And when you are, that probably feels great and wonderful, and of course, but if something's happened or, you maybe made a decision that maybe wasn't the best, or, life got jumped up and bit you, which happens sometimes, that accountability doesn't feel necessarily wonderful, but we also need it. That's also like the tension in the church, right? I live with that sometimes too. It's like people need accountability, right? And you try to do it as gently and as nice as possible, but we do get off track, sometimes in our lives in all sorts of ways. And I think about that even in terms of like I don't mind going to see my doctor when I know my diabetes is well controlled and the tests are all going to come back fine. When it's not, and I know it's probably not, and the tests are not all, and the numbers aren't going to come back fine, I'm not looking forward to it. Even though at the end of the day, they're not the ones that have to deal with it, right? They're just going to look at me and go, these aren't where I'm supposed to be. Like, yeah. But I also know if I don't go, I need to go. Like I need the accountability of going.
Yeah.
So, there is that kind of, it's almost like kind of being like a personal trainer, right? Like you're there to, cheerlead and help and motivate and all of that too, which I think is helpful and great. And sometimes that's wonderful and inspiring. And sometimes it's just like, yeah, you're telling me things I need to hear. Doesn't mean I want to hear it.
It's for me personally, it's very fulfilling.
Oh, I believe it.
Even in the tough conversations.
Yeah.
Because those people need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people make changes in their lives that got them on track to be in a much better position financially.
Nice.
Making better decisions. That's very fulfilling to me. One of the most fun things, though, I would have to say, is when I'm doing people's financial plans and I'm basically creating a balance sheet of their assets and their life, right?
Yeah.
Financially speaking. And for them to be able to see that end number, my assets, my liabilities, where's my net worth at, and hitting $1 million for people is a pretty awesome threshold in today's dollars, and probably won't be the same in 10 years, right? But that is really fun. I had some clients hit it the other day, and they were just so excited to see that they crossed over that threshold, and they were like, "Man, our hard work is paying off, and we're doing really good things financially speaking, and it feels good. But we're also having fun along the way. We're enjoying life." That's so rewarding and fulfilling. It just makes this job amazing.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, is there anything else we big area of financial planning we didn't touch on?
I don't think so. I think that gives a good broad brush strokes here of what the heck it even is, and what the experience would be if you sat down with someone like me. Is just like, okay, we're going to take a look at your financial position on everything. Yeah, we're going to take a look on, your income and your tax situation. Yes, we're going to take a look at what is actually important to you and actually have those conversations. And honestly, a lot of times people can't answer that right away. I want to retire. Okay, let's dig into that. But that's a big part of that. And then it's helping people stay on track for that. And like you said, the accountability piece of you, if it will, by having a once-a-year review. Yeah. And then having appointments as needed as life changes, because it does. And we just have conversations when we need to around those things. Yeah. And that's what a financial planner does. Yeah. And it educates you. What did I say? The statement? It was pretty good. I should say I should write that down. But I'm empowering people by educating them to make good financial decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good line. Yeah. There you go. See, you got an elevator speech.
I learned something from my podcast today.
There you go. Hope somebody else does too. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I think most people, my hope for most people would be for them to have the same experience that I had, which is, maybe you're not necessarily looking forward to it, or it's just something you feel like you have to do. But I'm guessing, and my hope would be most people came away the way that I felt like, which is that was far more interesting, rewarding, and satisfying, even those first couple of conversations we had, than I expected it to be. And I think it's always nice when things are better than you expect them to be.
I always like to underpromise and overdeliver.
Yeah. So, well, thank you all for joining us for the About podcast. Roy, thank you for sharing your amazing, earned wisdom with us once again. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you for hustling. We'll see everybody.
See ya.
Please note the information provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered personalized professional advice. Always consult with a qualified expert before making any decisions or taking any actions based on the information shared. Roy Hookey is an employee of Credentialed Wealth Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor, and may maintain positions in the securities discussed. All opinions expressed are Roy's and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of CWA.